This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, and we're recording now. Thank you. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Faye Farmer, and I am part of the Research Development Office at ASU. Our office is responsible for limited submissions, events like this, proposal management, graphics in support of proposals, and competitive intelligence, which is kind of landscape analysis and decision-making, or informing decision-making for pursuit of opportunities. So one of the things we wanted to talk about today was the MURI. So hopefully you're in the right place. The opportunity itself was released a couple weeks ago, maybe a while ago. What we do at this kickoff, because I see new faces, I do see a lot of regular faces. So this is, we're overwhelmingly staffed here. So if you have any questions, these are the people you want to ask them of. So I'll probably point you guys to fill in where I have gaps. We also have two presenters scheduled today. Dr. Bienenstock, thank you very much for coming. And Dr. Berman will be here later. So my job is to draw this out until Dr. Berman can drive back from her class and participate. So fingers crossed, we go till about 12, and she'll show up a little bit after that. So it's slow, eat slow. The opportunity itself, Dr. Bienenstock and Dr. Berman have both applied to this mechanism and have a familiarity with DoD. My co-collaborator on this presentation for, I really quickly want to point that out. That's why they've been asked to speak. They will speak towards the end. I've also asked Christina Nelson to participate in this event. Christina, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. I'm Christina Nelson, Project Proposal Manager in Global Security Initiative. We're sort of like the ASU liaison to the DoD, so we focus mostly on DoD proposals. So our, like my direct manager, Jamie Richardson, what you know her, very knowledgeable, and then our director, Dr. Melvin, was very knowledgeable about the DoD. So through osmosis, I've learned a lot about the DoD through them.
Perfect. And then I'm going to ask people in the back just to speak up if you're called on, just because our microphone is here apparently. Co-conspirator, the person who parsed the solicitation, did the checklist, and the white paper breakout is Quinn Wickham, our newest proposal manager in our office. So thank you very much for doing that. And we'll go over those documents at the end. If you're interested in looking at those, we can walk through those. Perhaps we'll do it to extend the time before Dr. Berman shows up. So solicitation. So on our agenda today is to talk about what our DoD performance at ASU is, some of the things that we know about the program, and importantly, I want to position you guys for the next cycle. So the topics are already out, and we'll talk a little bit about those. But at this stage, if you don't see yourself or haven't talked to a topic chief, you're at a disadvantage. So we want to have participants today and watching this recording later to think about the next cycle and what they can do to position themselves for the next rounds of topics. So DoD's, our university success is summed up on this slide. So we have performance that is legitimate and a nice chunk of change, right? So however, this last 5 years, and as part of our initiative through our VPR of the office, we want to push out on the DoD front. And GSI in particular is keen on expanding that and has multiple programs in moving that portfolio forward. Our successes are not awesome, but they're not terrible. We have been very good at subcontracting on MURIs. We have been less great at priming them, but we have. This is it's a mechanism that takes into consideration past performance for DoD, and so that's something to think about as you pursue it. We also have a group of people on campus who are topics are very specific. So you're going to extremely narrow population of people who can apply for those topics. One of the things that came up at last cycle, we had this kickoff as well, and one of the questions that they had in the group was that it says a senior PI with a portfolio, and I'm going to ask Jamie to, it's good she took a drink, but can you speak to the analysis you did on leadership for DoD MURIs and what you found about that analysis, please? And you're going to have to speak, maybe stand up and speak loudly because you're quiet.
Yeah, so we analyzed who typically has led MURIs in the past, and we found it was typically professor levels. We did see instances of associate professors leading MURIs, and we found a lot of diversity, but we did find a history of DoD success and things like that. So it is kind of something we want to build to.
Perfect, thank you. No, that's great. DoD MURIs are odd because they're driven by the topics. So they're not an annual cycle like NSF has the same call for NRTs. And so they kind of have the same size and shape every year. It's very different each and every year. One thing to consider is that, there's a lot of options then to inform how the topics are driven. But it's also hard to do an analysis on what's successful DoD MURI and what's an unsuccessful DoD MURI, because those that are successful are driven by the topic sheets. Last year, we surveyed, because concept notes do not require a FORSPA certification. They are sent in by the PI. We tracked about 20 concept notes. 6 were invited to full proposal. I'm going to tell you right now, you're next to the microphone. As you open your chips. We got 6 invited to full proposal, and I think 5 went into sponsor. 1 dropped out when realizing that their constellation, after feedback from the topic chief regarding their submission, they decided that they weren't competitive this cycle. Now their topic probably won't show up again unless they go in and really inform that topic chief. So something to think about. We are getting announcements back, award announcements back from that cohort, and we'll update our analysis accordingly. But for right now, we don't know the outcome for those. So the FY20 timeline, so that's this cycle in front of you. So if you don't have the solicitation, I will email it to you. It's this hunk of material here. There are 3 different groups. We'll have a slide dedicated to that. But so the solicitation number is varied depending on who you're applying for. But this is the timeline just to get yourselves positioned for what you want to submit. A white paper is pretty low lift. Again, the major lift is that you want to be responsive to one of the topics, right? And you want to have some kind of past experience and a larger effort. You can point to some kind of larger effort that's positioned well for a MURI, would benefit from a MURI mechanism. The white papers won't be submitted through won't be supported through my office. So you will be on your own to design and develop the white paper. Depending on our availability and your interest, we would do reviews. If you're in engineering, I don't know if engineering wants to review the white papers or not, and I'm looking at the person who would do the review.
No, engineering faculty are welcome to contact me. This is Tara Morley, the proposal manager there.
Tara, T-A-R-A.
T-A-R-A, yes.
Tara Morley. So engineering does have editorial capabilities. I'm sure if you have an affiliation with GSI would look at it. And just send an email to me, and if we have bandwidth, we'll definitely take a look. However, we're not officially supporting the white paper development. However, when you are invited to full, you will get one of the fantastic proposal managers, the art director of research development, attached to your proposal. If engineering doesn't want it, if engineering wants it, then you can get supported through engineering. If GSI doesn't want it, then does want it, you can get support through GSI. So that you have some options. That's one of the benefits for affiliating with these 2 wonderful women. So we have bandwidth to support multiple full proposals if you make it to that stage. And that includes support for editing, coordination of materials, documents. We'll have Elisa talk to a little bit about how Tobin helped her and her team. And then Christina can talk a little bit about how she helped Spring. But that's all strategy and development of a huge behemoth of an application. Okay, so these are the 3 sponsors that are feeding into this mechanism. So the way that this works is that those are the departments that have decided their topics. They have people who are in charge of those topics. They have a special flavor across them. And do you want to speak a little bit more about the flavors of the departments that are participating? You might have to, again, stand up and yell
All
just to capture it on recording.
So proposal 101 is to know your sponsor, right? Everyone knows it, right? Yes. Oftentimes in the BAA, there will be a synopsis of your sponsor, giving us an overview of their history or their mission. Sometimes it's not. And this one, I did go to the websites for ONR, ARO, and AFOSR, and they have pages dedicated to what their research foci are. I strongly recommend reading that, embedding it in your mind, and then speaking to it in your proposal, because that's what sponsors want to be. They want to see how you are helping them accomplish their mission. I did print these off. I won't read word for word unless you want me to.
Like drawing out.
Read word for word off of these. They are a smidge different. Each sponsor is going to have a different mission focus. The umbrella of DoD has general foci, and then the offices underneath have their own very granular foci. So for instance, ONR, amphibious expenditory maneuver, mission capable, persistent, and survivors of sea platforms, aviation, force projection, and integrated defense, undersea battleship and maritime domain access, and warfighter supremacy. So those words, I don't believe are specifically stated in here. The topics, those of you who have read this, are very granular. They're very specific, but they will somehow tie to those topics that just right here from their overarching topic research areas. So yeah, I just really, really recommend that you go to, once you've read these topics, know which ones you want to go to their website and do a little research on their research. Really get to know them and just be compliant to BA, of course, but think about them as you're writing. That's so, so, so important. Not just for MURI, for any.
Yeah, in particular, I think this one's just really unique because the topics are driven by the topic chief, but absolutely so. And then it gives you a different amount of money that each group has kicked in for this. You can see it's significant amounts, which is why we're having this kickoff. It is an annual call. So for the white paper, it is unique. It's the contents described on page 10. It's 4 pages, so it's a high end parentheses. It's a low lift, but you have to be really compelling, right? So that those and really responsive to those topics, which is why that early discussion with the topic chief. So if you don't see a topic this year, and you want to socialize for a topic next year, which is highly advisable, and I'm sure Lisa will talk a little bit about the cycle, but in fall, that's when you start reaching out if you have a DoD program officer and you get connected to the people who are driving the topics and follow up with whose cycle it is next. Your abstract and pushing that would be part of this. However, if you're well positioned and you feel like you're responsive, again, we had 20 white papers go in, we had 6 invited to full. May or may not have had a past discussion with the topic chief. We actually don't know haven't connected that yet. And then you develop that 4 pages, you submit it directly to the topic chief. They will get multiple submissions. I think white papers generally, what's it, cut to a quarter? So they get, what is it? On average, they have like 20 or 30 white papers, lots.
I mean,
and then they cut down. Yeah, and then they cut down to a quarter for full. So it's
No, they can cut down to,
they can cut down to 2
if they want.
if they want. Yeah,
I mean,
it's completely driven by the topic chief. Oh wait, you're good. You can just spill out. Let me get through mine and then we'll come to you. Hi, sit if you want a meal. Have a meal.
Thank you.
Other considerations is that you do a 3-year base and you add on years. If you have questions about that, you can talk to our research and advancement professionals who can walk you through that. But ideally, it's a you get everything done at 3 years, and if based on that performance, they'll renew you for the next 2. So the white paper is solely by the topic chief for an evaluation panel chaired by the topic chief. So the idea is that you have to be in the sweet spot of what they're looking for, and then the evaluation panel is the next step. So they want to look at you. We'll let Lisa talk about it. Again, it's very clearly outlined in the solicitation what the evaluation criteria is, and relevance to DoD is always important. Okay, so after you submit your concept note, before, during, after, it's actually whenever you want to, you can go to DC and meet with a program officer. It's not necessarily tied to this program, but you can meet with anybody you want to, as long as it's about your work and program officer specific. The reason I bring this up is because it's run out of KED, which is the research arm of the university. It is an opportunity to get reimbursement for your travel to DC. So that's the link, and I'll send these PDFs out. But it's 2 weeks in advance of the trip. You can do it paid for one person to go round trip and lodging and meals. All you need to do is one per year, and you have to file who you're meeting with and when you met with them. So it's a pretty low lift just to get reimbursed for something. And then if you have us pay for you going out and coming back, you can go see other program officers too while you're there. So make a week of it. So we're really encouraging that. Okay, so now we're going to rely on Elisa to talk about, and again, it's a small group and mostly staff, so we can have a conversation, and I encourage that. But you have so much knowledge. Go. Dr.
One thing, just so if you go in ARO, you have to go to North Carolina.
Okay.
Would that be covered too?
Yeah, it's a program officer anywhere in the country.
It's not as efficient. So you
It's
can,
not as efficient.
yeah, it's, I mean, you know, ONR and AFOSR are in the same building in Boston, and you know, ARO is up down in Durham, so that's not as.
We're gonna check closer.
Okay, so I think I was asked to talk for 2 reasons. One is because I wrote a almost successful proposal a couple years ago, and then I was part of another team last year, so there's a lot of lessons learned from my experience writing these proposals. But I think another reason that I'm included in the list is because when I was a program manager at Army Research Office, I finished up 2 MURIs and I started a 3rd. And so I wasn't the topic chief for any of them, but I have some insights into how these things process from the time that they're wee little ideas in the back of the brain of a program manager until they're competed through the reason why there's only a few topics every year, and they're big money, is because there's a huge competition among program managers in order to win their topic. That first is within each building and then goes to the Office of the Secretary of Defense for the final sort of countdown. And then you get informed about whether or not your topic actually made the cut. You could be chatting up somebody who never gets past the door. And so that's the other thing, is that I have had the inside track on all phases of MURI production from both sides. And so
That's good.
all right, so some useful things I can say is writing a white paper is exact, especially if you don't know the program chief, but even if you do know the topic chief. Writing a white paper is incredibly important. You have to grab their imagination, and as was already said, you need to make it relevant to the mission of not just the BAA, but the service. And there's the 3 different services, all of them, ONR, AFOSR, and ARO, are all the 6-1 basic research branches of, so they're not interested in anything applied, but despite the fact that they're not interested in anything applied and they're actually interested in real basic research, their mission is to do basic research that ultimately will benefit the boots on the ground. And if you don't have your boots on the ground in mind when you're doing this, then you're not going to be able to tell the story that's going to make you win. So boots on the ground is what you should always be thinking of. And boots on the ground for Navy is, you know, big boats. But remember, the Navy is also responsible for the Marines. So you want to think Marines when you're thinking boots on the ground. All of them have a cyber capability now that they're interested in. Some types of the materials are clearly more beneficial for one or the other, but if you have a proposal for ARO about materials and you write it in a way that sounds like it's amphibious, they're going to be less interested, and they're going to say, why did they just send this to O&R? So you got to remember that, as I said, with regard to the competition among the different program managers to get their topic, everybody wants MURI, right? Actually, having closed a couple of these, I'm not sure why everybody wants a MURI, because they're a huge headache in some ways. But you do. You want a MURI because that helps focus your attention. Your portfolio is huge, but you've got like one person to poke at, which is the PI for that MURI, instead of poking at 15 people for the same amount of money. And so in some ways, it's a big win for the program manager to get one. And so it's really competitive, but they compete for everything, and they're competing for resources, and they want to help their boots on the ground, not the boots on the ground from the other branches. So look at what their mission is. That was a really key thing that she said, because if you don't write it in that way, then it's not going to resonate. The other things that program, now the bottom line when you're writing something like this, especially something like this, because again, if they've got a MURI and they've got all this money going to 6, PIs and one project, that means that when they give their evaluation, their evaluation for how they get promoted at the end of the year, they're going to have to present nice slides about your project. And they're going to need to talk about your project, because every year you have to tell your boss that you've accomplished something. And if every year you're, from the program manager's perspective, you're telling your boss about what you've accomplished, as versus everybody else in the room, and you want to show that you've done a good job, you better pick a good MURI if you're picking a MURI. And you got to pick a MURI where the people in that MURI are going to be making nice slides for you. And you got to pick a MURI where they're going to be publishing in good journals. And you've got to pick a MURI that's going to make your stats look great. And so when you're writing the proposal, those are the kinds of things you need to, and in your engagement, when you talk to them on the phone and everything, you have to make sure that you're always responsive and on time, but that you make really nice charts that are really interpretable, that they can take and pop and, cut and paste. The other thing is, there's a part in the BAA where they tell you what the evaluation criteria are. And I know as the PI type, when I'm writing these things, that I want to sort of ignore that part. I want to see if I'm supposed to use Times New Roman 12 or 11, but I really don't give a damn about that stuff at the end of the proposal, because it just seems like a bunch of gobbledygook. Well, it isn't, because what you need to do is answer all those questions so that when the reviewers are reading your proposal, they can take your paragraph, copy and paste it into the little form they're given, and satisfy your criteria. So you want to write these proposals so that it's easy to evaluate, and it's easy to justify, and it's easy for your program manager or your topic chief to send it up the chain so that they can easily be received, and so that you're providing the least amount of work for them to translate what you've done for their bosses. And if you can do that in the proposal, then before you really talk to them much, then they'll know that you can do that when you're actually performing for them, and they're going to need these things annually and more and more. So that's basically, we think of the proposal, and a lot of PIs, a lot of academics think about the proposal as, I've got a really smart idea and I'm going to write about it, and everybody's going to be really happy because it's so brilliant, and they're going to want to give me money. And in some sense, yeah, that's all well and good, but all research comes with risk, and they're all aware of that. What they want to know is, even if they might be taking a risk on the research, they're not taking a risk on the research team. They're not taking a risk on the quality of the product. And so all that attention to detail is really necessary. I don't know if I'm on time.
No, you're perfect.
You always say that, but I never really know.
I know. No, it is. I would tell you if you weren't. The question that I have is, so the two. You talk about, can you talk a little bit more about how you proceeded to write a white paper the first cycle that you were here, and you had just started at ASU? And so what was your interaction with the topic chief at that time?
All right, so this is not really fair.
Okay, but
okay, because I was a program manager at ARO, and I needed to leave because my husband was going on sabbatical, and I didn't want to be there anymore. So I called a bunch of my friends, and one of them replaced me. And she was sitting in there, and she had a topic win. And I knew she had a topic win because I read these things, because it's my environment. And so I called her. I didn't even call her. I just knew what I called her and I said, hey, you've got a topic. Congratulations. And she said, thanks. And she said, are you going to apply? And I said, I think so. She goes, yeah, I was just going to write the letter inviting a bunch of people, but you're on the list. And I said, great. And I said, do I need to ask you any questions? And she said, no. I said, is there a conflict of interest because it's me? And she said, no. She's already checked. And so
go back, you got a letter from your topic chief.
Oh,
so
yeah.
There are interested people out there who said, who win the topic and say, hey, I know that there's a research issue who's doing this particular thing, and I'm going to invite them and draw their attention to the topic.
Yeah.
So that is also occurring right now.
And yeah, and I've gotten a couple, sometimes you get these directly and sometimes you get these indirectly through other people who want to lead other things. So, and that's not just true for MURIs. The other thing is, so for example, last year I was on another project, and what happened there was we, ASU identified a topic, and then we reached out to people we knew who would be interested. Now, here's another place where my formerly sitting in this office was an advantage. We knew who the topic chief had funded as a young investigator and for other types of MURIs before. So the bottom line is, if you're thinking about a MURI, it might be too late. What you really want to be doing is thinking about an independent investigator award to several different chiefs, or not chiefs, several different program managers across the different services. And then you get to be a known commodity. And you don't have to win a lot of these because, for example, I review for ONR and AFOSR all the time. I mean, there's only a limited number of us, so we review on everything. And there's certain names that keep on coming up because they keep on proposing. And you know what kind of work they do, you know the quality of the work. The other thing is if you're an independent investigator here, it's not like NSF. Every year you will be called, maybe not every year, I think every 2 years you are called to task to give a presentation at a meeting with several of the PMs from an office and all the other performers that are working for that PM. So you get to meet your competition. And if you think of it as competition, it's not as good as thinking about them as your collaborators. You get to meet your potential future collaborators. You get to, boring room. Last time I did this, it was at NASA Ames for like 2 days with horrible food and listen to a bunch of talks on topics you really don't give a damn about. But you meet these people, you play nice, you act engaged, you ask at least 2 questions a day so that they think you're not sleeping, and you make your program manager realize how really important you are and beneficial you are, just to have in her sort of query of tools. And then you get on that list when they have a topic that you might be relevant to. And sometimes the topic, they don't just send out the, hi, I've got a topic that you might be interested in. They send out a, hi, I have a topic that you or somebody you know might be interested in. And then you could weave yourself onto a team, even if you're not directly sort of in line with what is pertinent. And then sort of expand your research portfolio that way. So the main thing is to try to get relationships going. And the way to get relationships going is to start with, less ambitious grants than a MURI. But to people who may at some point, and usually every 3 or 4 years, if you're not a real dunderhead, most program managers get to do some MURI.
So thank you.
And I know there are heads out there. Please fund me for smaller grants.
And now I'm preoccupied with underheads.
Add preoccupation.
No, it's okay. I was going to go back to Christina for 2 things. Was that one is the DARPA Young Faculty Award and what you've done at GSI. I will follow up with a list of other awards to pursue and consider, because I think that's what we did last year as well. Based on your recommendation from last year, and I'm sorry I didn't include it in the slide deck or tell Quinn about it, but there is a very robust list of young investigator, independent investigator, early career, and I have a list and links, and I will send that out as follow-up to this meeting, and hopefully include it in next year's presentation. But can you talk a little bit about what GSI does for young investigator? Please,
Yeah.
yell.
So GSI has done some info sessions for the Young Investigator Awards. I mean, in its name, it is folks who are new in their field, right? And so a lot of times early career.
Can you just come closer?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that the mic?
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
mic. That's a fancy mic.
Um,
That doesn't pick up the whole room.
stand over here. So for instance, ONR has, yeah, right?
Yeah.
YIP, yep. DARPA has YFA. And so young is almost always in the title, or early is in the title of a lot of these. These are great ways to get in the door with the sponsor, let them know you, just like what she was mentioning. Get to know your name, get to know your research. And a lot of times when an early career researcher is funded by one of those early career opportunities, it just dominoes because you're a known entity, right? It's safe for them to keep funding you and fund your research. So GSI has done several info sessions and strongly encourage faculty and staff to come to that because staff can then disseminate the information to their faculty about it and really, really encourage people across ASU to go after those. Did that answer your question? Was there another?
And then I had a second question, so stay
Yep.
standing. The second one is when you relate your topic to the sponsor, a really quick and easy way to do it is a Heilmeier. And can you explain what a Heilmeier is? For those of you.
Heilmeier was a man, but he created a set of questions, 7, 8 questions, depending on how you break it down, that are just sort of thought-provoking questions. And if you can't answer them, don't write your proposal. Things like how much will it cost? What are your checkpoints? What are your milestones? Who cares is our favorite, because if you can't answer who's going to care, guess what? Sponsor's not going to give you money because they don't care. How's it done currently? How is your approach a differentiator from how it's done currently? Prompts like that, really good questions. And again, this is not just for DoD proposals. This is a great project management tool for any kind of big project you're working on. If you can't answer those, don't do it. Answering your question?
All right, I just dawned on me that I don't know if Dr. Berman knows where she's going.
I will help you kill some time. I will say another plug for relationship management, how critically important that is for those YFAs or the ONRs as well. Be very careful, and a lot of you probably already know this, about reading through to see what the solicitation says about contacting the program managers, because sometimes you can when it's an active VA, sometimes you cannot. So be clear on what that sponsor's rules are. But I think Faye was the one who said, or no, maybe you're the one, by the time you're thinking about submitting, it's probably too late. You'll be thinking ahead of time and reaching out to those program officers, topic chiefs, whatever, ahead of the opportunity that you're targeting. Because if you can get that relationship going, you can do casual conversations on the phone or maybe travel to DC or wherever their office is and get a meeting with them. Because these are little seeds that get planted and the relationship grows, they get to know you. A lot of times if you're just some random person that's submitting, they have no idea who you are. But if they're like, oh yeah, I remember talking to this person and they showed me their white paper and it was great. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so then, so that's relationship-driven, topic chief discussions, how a topic is determined. When you wrote your white paper, what? And 2 white papers, really.
Actually, and I'm working on a third.
And a third. She is nothing but persistent. What do you find are best practices for your white paper development process?
Okay, so there's only 4 pages.
But
So there's only 4 pages. So the first thing you do when you're writing a proposal white paper is to tell them what you're going to tell them and who you are. And so the first thing I do is basically say, in order to achieve, in order to meet the need of the Department of Defense or the desire of the Department of Defense to solve this problem, I've put together this interdisciplinary team of the most brilliant people you could ever possibly hope to see. Here's who we are, here's what we do, here's why we do it, and this is why you want to get us involved. And most of the time, a lot of people say start with the solutions and the topics, not with the people, but actually relation building, even in print, who you are matters. They want to know who the hell this is and why they should do it. So you don't have to spend a lot of time on that. I put it in a table. That's the other thing. One of the things I learned when I was working for a government contractor is that every page should have a picture. And your pictures should be smart, not just eye candy, because again, that's what they cut and paste into their presentation, their bosses. And if you give them nice pictures, they're going to want to have you just because you make them look good. So it's all about, trust me, it's all about making your program manager look good. So that's the first thing I do. The second thing is I just copy the structure that they tell me to do in the, I mean, I could show you right now. They have like 4 little subsections. And the first one is sort of what's the big picture? What are your goals? What are your specific aims? I usually, because something like this, because it's $5 million, I usually have 5 specific aims, but it could be 6 or it could be 4. And then I just put them on the front page. And then the next thing is, what's the technical merits? That's where, or what are you going to do and why? That's where I sort of answer the high mile questions. I tell them why, where everybody else is failing in their approach to answer this question now, and how we are going to come up with an approach that's going to fill the gaps that these other approaches just can't manage. So that's the second thing I do, is I basically start by ghosting everybody else and saying, you know, right now you're not solving this problem because everybody else is doing crap, and that's why you need our team. Then after I say that, and I try to make it convincing, but pulling out, you're demonstrating, your literature review is demonstrating that you know that everything else is crap. So it's sort of it's a twofer. And then the next thing you do is you talk about the military relevance, because that's what they want. And a lot of academics think that this isn't really important. They need to cut and paste this into their thing. This is what's important to them. If it's important to them and you want to get funded, give them something with teeth that they could hang on and they could say, wow, they really get the military relevance. And then there's some budgeting stuff. And that's just a rough order of magnitude, and nobody pays any attention. And if you're completely different when you get to the proposal, nobody cares. But it should round out to about either the 6 or 7 million, just under that is usually what they want to see for the white papers. And so I don't know if
so for military relevance, I'm going to go back one more, because we're working with a group of people on the CDMRPs, which is the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program. And the military relevance is challenging for a lot of academics and who don't speak the language. So you can ask for advice and help on that as well, and ask people around you, and ask GSI or some other thing, because it's sometimes you get toss off ones like, oh, it's of course important because then your boat won't sink, but there's no connection, right? Or it's, of course it's important because these materials will be important for saving the lives of, countless hundreds,
the best,
and then it's really huge.
Right. Now, the best way to do that, to make it really visceral, is with a use case, if you can. Now, in the white paper, a use case is hard. But even if you can't do like a whole use case, you could put in a little example of, for example, this would have been really useful in the battle of such and such, where this and this was a terrible disaster that happened. But if they had this particular kind of material, that wouldn't have been the case, right? And so just something like that is really useful in a white paper. It's one sentence, and you would have put in another sentence anyway, so you can always, replace. I did want to say something about the wonderful comments I got on the failed MURI proposal from a couple years ago.
Okay. Do you get comments? Before we go there, let's wrap up the white paper.
Okay.
And then get there. So I do want to point out that the people who are in attendance and registered will get a shell document is what we call it. It's the white paper shell document, the things that you just walked through. Again,
I never
kudos
got
to
this.
Quinn.
Can I get this?
Yeah, you can get it.
Thank you. I'm not signed up.
This is what took the most amount of time, right? So Quinn parsed it. It's color coded, and again with Tobin's tutelage, and it will go through. It goes through what the solicitation requirements are. Review criteria is incorporated because we do want you to pay attention to that as you write. And then here's sections A through G must fit within 4 pages. So here they've actually pointed to this list you're supposed to see in the topic area. So you're supposed to reference those. But here the header's already set up for you. I think, did you do styles? Look at him. He even did styles. So you can actually update your styles accordingly. So when you use this very fancy text, be sure you paste without formatting. That's my tip for this one. But that's great. So, and then it'll update automatically depending on how you want to change things. So you actually walk through exactly what you want to do. So that's it. And then we also have one for the proposal itself. But let's do things after you submitted your white paper and got the acknowledgement and the invitation to full. What did that package look like?
Oh, so first it's just a congratulations. We've decided to select you, which is a mixed blessing because it means that you've been invited to write a proposal, which you're probably not going to win, and you're going to work your butt off for 2 months, and it's.
But at that point, you have somewhere between a 25% chance and a 50% chance, maybe a 10% chance to a 50% chance of winning. If you're invited to full.
Right.
The chances of actually getting an award are dramatic.
No. So now you know that you've weeded your way through, and your program officer will usually tell you where you stand in the rankings and what they liked and what they didn't like. They're really good about telling you what the reviewers, and they usually have a few reviewers for this, like 3 or 4, not 7 or 8 sometimes, and they'll tell you what the reviewers thought. They don't give you a list of all the reviewer comments. They give you sort of a summary of the main points of the reviewer comments and the things they were concerned about, things that you really need to address, and the things that they loved, which is really important. And then they'll also give you some guidelines about, most of the time they'll give you some clue about how many others they've invited and how many they rejected, so that you get some sense of how you place. If not, you can ask them that. If they're going to tell you, they're going to tell everybody else, but there's no reason that they're not allowed to tell you, so you may as well ask. And even you think that it's a 25% chance, but you know that it isn't, so you got to gauge that. And so, and then the other thing is that this is another relationship establishing moment, right? So you actually can, it's sort of an invitation. You get the first thing in a letter, and then they said, if you want to talk to me, call, like, or let's set up a time, and then you call. What I recommend you do with regard to that is you might want to have a quick little back and forth, but then you schedule a time to call when the whole team is together. So after you convene the team and you debrief them about what the initial feedback was, and you come up with a game plan, you rehearse the game plan, and then you get the PM on the phone so that you can, now sometimes there's 2 topic chiefs. If you can get them both, that's great. If you can only get one, try to get the lead. And if you, and try not to talk to them separately without the lead, because sometimes I've seen instances where that's been disastrous. Not for me, but for the people.
And in last year's cycle, one of the submitting PIs did exactly that, gathered his team, reviewed the work, went back and forth on scoping, made sure that they had addressed the white paper comments, reassembled his team, spoke to the program manager, and at that point realized that this speaks to it was 25%, but not really. The program manager said, oh, yeah, maybe not. You're not super responsive. We're actually going this way with it, and we're thinking more in this arena. And he recognized that even through that amount of work, it wasn't a legitimate 25% chance at that point. So that's when he pulled. So that conversation saved him, I don't know, Kellyanne, like 3 weeks of work.
Mm-hmm.
It took 3 weeks to get there, and then he had the rest of his summer free. But
Happier team.
yeah, I have a very happy team, and that wasn't horrible to watch, right? So
Yeah.
Kellyanne was attached to that proposal. So, okay. Do you have any recommendations on that stage, or?
I think do it as early as possible, so that way you aren't wasting tons of time. They were working really well together as a team, even though they eventually hit that no-go decision. So that.
I also want to say, so for example, I'm working on a project now, and we're just building the team because we've got till June 3rd, right? So we just started talking about what we're going to do, and we haven't even invited some people. But the bottom line is we already know that if we fail after the white paper, we've got an NSF proposal.
Yeah.
And so it's not really wasted time. It's a really sort of, I think of it as an opportunity to get really, it's like, you always push off these collaboration opportunities until you've got something in front of you. This is like a fire under your butt to move things forward. And if it doesn't work, you can just pivot to something else.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and it was very clear that they were a functioning team.
Right, so
once they
they'll
hit that
probably
no-go
get their
decision.
funded someplace else.
Yep.
Or there could be a topic that comes up this year.
Perfect.
Still happy.
Great. Okay, so now white paper.
White
Oh,
paper's
sorry.
done.
Now full proposal. I'm just behind.
Yeah. So I got the curse of being really good at writing white papers and not as good at writing proposals. But the proposal that we wrote with Tobin's help, which was, I thought, a pretty darn tight proposal, didn't get funded. But the good news was, well, it was sort of mixed news. The good news was that although they decided against funding it, it was between us and another team. And the reason they went with the other team is because our proposal was so innovative that it was just a little too high risk for a 5-year, even with a 3-year, 2-year option, that a 1-year, 4-year option would have been the way that, because it was just so new and it's like, didn't you want innovation? Yeah, but that was a little crazy, which we couldn't have known up front. But the other thing that I think is really important to note is, again, the review criteria, because when they send you back the analysis of your proposal, they send you everybody's written comments and your scores. And there's 7 criteria, and they're all rated equally, and they're out of 25. And the thing is that there's 3 criteria that the traditional academics think are important, and the rest traditional academics don't. And on one of them, and I don't know why, because we paid more attention to military relevance than anybody, we got a 6. I think it was probably really a 16, and it was a typo, because it was crazy, because we got like 24s and 23s, and then we got this 1 6. And it was like, what's that about? But it does really tell you that the reviewers are taking these things really seriously, that insofar to their ability to be able to cut and paste text that you wrote to justify funding you makes it really easy to them. So that's something people don't think about, but having read a bunch of these, I do, because it's like I knew that those are the ones I wanted because it made less work for me. And then finally, it was in these who cares criteria that often, if you as the PI isn't marginalizing it, somebody on your team says, oh, that's not important, we got brilliant science here. It's like, no, because our brilliant science is only 25 points, and this one's also 25 points. And so if we get low on here and high on this, it doesn't matter because we're still going to win. I think that that's something that's really important. And I mean, you saw, I sent you.
Yes.
And
all of them.
And we scored wonderfully. We were told that if any of the funded programs failed because their teams were just horrible and the money came back into the system, they would have given us the money, which is rarely done, if ever. But unfortunately, nobody. I went out there trying to sabotage people, but it
didn't work. It didn't work. So that's it's a good lesson, and it's also important to note that you are continuing to go back, right? So the persistence is important because it doesn't change, and the fact that so can you explain the topic that so you're a partner, you're kind of in the cycle last year, so you had the fail cycle and you have this last cycle. When that evolved, was it the same topic chief or different topic chief?
So the topic chief wasn't the same, but it's the same office. So we did it with Army Research Office. Mimi Strand is the head of Life Sciences Division at Army Research Office. The first year we sent it to Lisa Troyer as the prime, and somebody in physics division as the sub chief, and Lisa's in life sciences under Mimi. Last year it was Mimi, and she was paired with somebody else, but that person quit, so then she was paired with Lisa. So Lisa was involved. Lisa Troyer was involved in 2 of our. She's sort of a, she's either the chief or the co-chief on both of the ones we applied to last year. This year, the one I'm applying to, Lisa it's her arch enemy, so it's going to be really fun.
Okay. Because that speaks to how so are you going in having not socialized with that topic chief?
By socialized, do you mean have I had dinner with him? Yeah. I've had dinner with him.
Okay, in a personal or professional capacity, because that's interesting. No, I'm just saying. So what led up to because this is the 3rd cycle, This is, how did you establish a relationship with the next topic chief? Different topic chief, third
Well,
cycle.
he's in the office. He goes to social network analysis meetings, and I'm a social network researcher, so I've seen him there. He also went to Minerva meetings, and I was at Minerva meetings, so I've seen him there. So I just occasion a lot of places where he is. And when he works at Army Research Office. He got there after I had left, but he worked for somebody who had been a reviewer on a lot of things I worked on, and I reviewed a lot of his stuff. So there's just a lot of common stuff. I mean, yeah. And that doesn't mean he likes me, but at least I didn't fire anybody he cares about.
So that was perfect. Thank you. Okay. So then segue. I don't know if we're going to speak for spring, but that's fine. The other thing that we will be sending out, courtesy of Quinn, is this check sheet. I don't know if I can get down here. It's a weird thing. Yeah, there it is. So this is your team. Oh, so you're gonna go! Yay! Hi, Dr. Merman. Come on in. You can sit anywhere. We were just stalling for time. Sorry. I know, you're good. I'm pleased that you can make it. Let me go through this real quick, and you can situate yourself. Thank you, Tara. So one of the things you'll get as well from this is that we will send this checklist. It's like a general plan information type of thing, and then the white paper checklist. It's very simple and gives you what you should be, just documents that you should be submitting at this point. And then we like, as professional proposal managers, to track who is actually delivering the mail and the deadlines that you actually assign. And then a quick trick to do is a status update. And then you can just copy and paste this image to your email to your collaborators and scare them and say, look, it's all red. Or look, it's all green at the end. It's also very satisfying at the end to put greens all the way across. So these are the proposal subsection blow-ups. So this again, it's a high-level checklist. And then we do it again for the proposal checklist, the full proposal. And then here, the proposal requirements are pulled out separately. So here you can actually check whether you're compliant or not. Some of it's RA driven, some of research administrator professional driven, but it's for you to look at too. And they'll pull it just quick and dirty compliances. Here are the topics, if you haven't seen those already, by the offices that are supporting them. And there's, again, Christina did say they were rather granular. They are very granular. I made it through, I think, 10 and then gave up. But I'll get there eventually. We also appended a calendar, and by we, I again mean Quinn, with the actual due dates for this from the solicitation. And that should help you figure out when you want to submit. Importantly, we do recommend that there's an ORSPA proposal deadline that you adhere to. The white papers, again, don't need authorized representative submission. They can be sent from you to the person of the topic chief. But the full proposal does need lots of coordination. That's why we're offering proposal management support.
So the proposal due dates this year about 4 weeks ahead of last year's?
Correct.
Do you have any idea why?
It was 4 weeks ahead the year before too. That's been the same for the
Oh.
last. The first area I worked on was due in December,
Okay.
so you can see how it's creeped up.
Okay, that's why.
I don't know why that is, but
We would have mapped to the fiscal year.
Well, everything else is moving slower, so we're really, that's like really awesome that they're able to get the topics out ahead of time. They've slipped in the past, so
okay.
they're making
So
up.
that's what
They're making it up.
Okay, so that you will get that as part of your package for attendance day.
Faye, can I say one thing
Go for
about
it,
the
Kevin.
proposal requirement? Can
Sure.
you open that? I talked to Quinn about this, but this is really important for everybody because I have asked 3 different people at ARO or various other entities. So if you go down, Faye, it's like in the middle of the thing. There's this part where whether or not you can include your current and pending in the body of the text, or whether or not it's a separate document, and it almost contradicts itself. But after talking to multiple program officers, you have to include it in both. So what we've always done is just put a table that you include your current and pending as simple as possible, but at a very high level within the text, and then you add the details within everybody's CV.
Okay.
So
current and pending is
if you have questions on that, you can ask me when you go to write your full proposals. I have way more experience with that than I care to admit.
courtesy of Elisa.
Well, it
And
wasn't
some
just
others.
her.
It wasn't just.
No, it wasn't just
No,
you. Yeah, and then Little Street Cred is Tobin managed to, Kellyanne was going to manage to, but one dropped out. So we do have, and then Tobin cycle did one prior.
I've done 4.
You've done 4
Yeah,
total. Oh, and then
Swarovski's.
yeah. Okay.
And
So
Tara was on that one.
and Tara was one on. Yeah, who'd
That
you
was
do?
one of your first ones.
We were on Leapings together.
Leapings together. Okay, perfect. So we do have experience that you can draw on in the office, but we also have PIs that you can. They're very friendly. Marco Santella would be here, but he was overwhelmed with his actual work. So and Leaping's very generous too, so I don't think that would be a problem. Speaking of generous PIs, Dr. Berman raced across Kingdom Come to come here, so I want to give her a chance to talk. We have already gone into detail on, courtesy of Dr. Bienenstock, we've gone into detail for the process by which she chose her topic, developed her white paper. She's going for cycle 3. So we've gone into great detail, but that was her experience. So if you could, feel free to turn around and speak to the microphone in the crowd. Your personal experience with developing the white paper and like straight on. You don't have to be if you don't want to. You can circle.
Oh, okay.
It's not necessary. Just want you to see the people. What was your? Tell us a little bit about the experience you had last cycle when you saw the topics. Did you have any experience at all in any, like when you saw the topic, had you talked to the topic chief prior?
So the topic that I was on dealt with octopuses understanding their sensory motor control, and this was an ONR topic. So I was already on a team. I was on an ONR funded project by that PI, which is about octopus-inspired soft robot arms. So I thought that that we were a good candidate to apply to this because it's very specific, and we already had maybe a year at that point of experience on that topic, or very closely related topic. Yeah. And then, so in your process of developing the white paper, were you responsible for developing all that content, or did you cycle? What was your process for including the team? So the first step was building the team. So there was someone else who was on the current Octopus project, and then we sought out other team members. And so that took a little bit of time to find some team members, and then we had discussions, and we were in different states, you know, some were in New York or Texas or California. So we had to organize meetings on like conference calls about ideas in the white paper, and we had a Google Doc, and we just had all these iterations. The other part was we had an international collaborator, which became kind of tricky, not due to the coordination, just due to how ONR would fund them. And because originally I was under the impression that ONR Global, which I think they still could, that they could fund them, but then the program manager asked, well, what if they can't fund this person? And so in the full MURI proposal, we actually ended up, actually ASU was generous enough to commit some funds to this person's as a consultant. But yeah, we had to work through those issues. Yeah, it was just a lot of conversations. Yeah. And then when you submitted, and I forgot because I called out our experience, but Christina supported you for the full, right? So yeah. I just want to make sure that we get credit where credit's due. But so when you got the report back, or when you got feedback back from your technical expert review for the white paper, how did you incorporate that and start thinking about your full? Yeah, so I think they wanted us to expand on certain things like facilities who would run the experiments, which I guess the white paper is much, much shorter than the full proposal. So you have more of an opportunity to expand on certain details. The role of the international collaborator, that was another sticking point that we had to figure out. So we tried to address that as clearly as possible in the full proposal. Yeah, it seemed like it was a little confusing. We had to, because they said, well, you know, conditional, you know, invitation to submit the full proposal. And then, because they had, I don't know, they were stuck on the international collaboration part, but hopefully we worked that out to their satisfaction. I don't know. But and then so did you at any point did you talk to your project or your program manager after your submission to the white paper for your after your white paper was conditionally in? How did you get that information? Like, did you reach out to them? And
I got to see him at a meeting for our current project, so try to get some clarification on that when I talked to him there.
We spent a lot of time talking about relationships and how important that is. Can you speak a little bit to how you drive your relationships?
With the program manager
anybody.
or
well,
anybody.
It will fund you eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this case we were fortunate that we were already funded by him, so he was familiar with at least a subset of the team's work. I think that several people on the team had experience with the DoD, either as young investigator for ONR or as one of the team members worked on like a similar project on octopus-inspired arms, like 2005. So they had that background, and so I think that the relationships became very key because first we had to convince who was going to be on our team, because these were people who were they had a lot of choices, I guess, who to pick, and I mean, hopefully we made the case that they should join us. But I think that one thing that allowed us to recruit our international collaborator was that one of our team members, and we didn't know this going in, was he did a sabbatical with this international, renowned octopus researcher. So he already knew him. So that was just a serendipitous thing. But the relationships, I think, just maintaining communication among the team to get the whole thing together. Sometimes that was a challenge, but I think everyone's busy. So, and if they're in different states and even countries, but I think, I just had to show like very consistent commitment that I'm committed to seeing this through and that I'm committed to pulling this together, and I will take responsibility for getting the entire document. They can send me rough text or whatever. I will incorporate it to the best of my ability. And I had a lot of help from my co-PI here at or one of the co-PIs who's at ASU, staying up the last few days. This is not the best way to do it, but just like, this is the way it ended up, was staying up, all night, like for a couple of days, just trying to make sure that everything was put together. So I think those, in that sense, relationships were key to, ultimately submitting it. And
Now, and were you you mentioned the Young Investigator? Were you an award recipient of that?
I was an ONR Young Investigator with a different program manager, but he was also on this topic. I guess not the primary PM, but he was also involved in this MURI topic. And there was another person on the team who was an ONR Young Investigator recipient.
Because we had spoken a little bit earlier about how important that was to demonstrate your performance and your aptitude, and then drive kind of some of that performance, and then go for the MURI. And you're a great example of how you've done that. At least Dr. Bienstock came at it from a kind of a sideways, where where she came from an agency. And then do you see a topic that you're going to respond to this year?
This year, I don't think so. I think after going through the whole submission last year, it took a lot of effort. So
are you going to repurpose them? Because one of the things we talked about too is that it's a really solid proposal, right? So you can probably repurpose it for another agency.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I think we've
unless you want
discussed like ideas for NSF at this point. So we still have not heard back about the MURI. Waiting. But I mean, we've even since submitting it, we've discussed ways to repurpose for other proposals.
Go for it.
A couple things that you said.
I'm very quiet speakers.
Is and this is new. It's easier to build teams with foreign nationals. Well, maybe not foreign nationals, but at least people who don't have green cards. Just because you don't want to get stuck in some, technicality.
So people who do have green cards?
No, you want to make sure everybody has a green card, at least, right? At least, if they're foreign nationals. Like, if they've got visa questionability, now's not the time to put them on your team, as horrible as that sounds, because it just could be a complication, and it could be the excuse to not get funded. And after you've worked as hard as you have on a MURI grant or a DARPA grant, you don't want that to be the case. So that's one thing from another proposal that I was working on. I wanted to point out, and your foreign national example gave me, it's always easier to just, for these types of grants, it doesn't mean you can't hire people as consultants or do other things or include them, or if they're, get them, get student funding for them so they have a postdoc or whatnot if you want to include them. But it's just easier these days to not have that complication, as much as I hated to say that, but I thought that could be a real headache. And I also want to say that the support that we got from KED was unbelievably important, because you're writing all this science and your head is so far into what you're writing, and you know what it means because you've worked really hard to understand it yourself. I think you're explaining it, but you're probably not. And so having people proofread and write and organize and see the big picture is really key, because you write this proposal at such multiple levels, and one PI can't be at all those levels. And most of your co-authors, as nice as they might seem, really only care about the parts they wrote. So they don't read the whole proposal. They just read over again what they wrote the first time and tell you that it's great. And so the only reality check you really get, I think, is the institutional support you get. And I think that's really huge.
So I'll pay you later. But yeah.
I got lunch.
Yeah, there you go. That's what you get. Okay, so are there any questions that I haven't covered? I feel like
I have a question for really both of them. I sort of know the answer, but I think it's important for everybody to hear it. This is the multidisciplinary university research grant, and how essential is it? Because some of these topics, as we saw, are so specific. You might say, well, I'm just going to get a bunch of electrical engineers or something. Can either of you speak to that?
You're going to be in charge of the microphone. Who's speaking to it first?
I can speak to it. I mean, so I'm going to misquote the old, not the new, person who was in charge of the MURIs at the Office of Secretary of Defense for a long time. These are multidisciplinary university research grants, which means that universities do it, but they don't have to be multi-university. So that's the first thing that's a misconception. The second thing is it has to be interdisciplinary, but that doesn't mean that two completely different types of physics that are engaged would be fine. Okay, so it doesn't have to be, like biology and engineering. However, the more outside of the box you can think for a MURI, the more revolutionary, not evolutionary, as DARPA always says, the better. And so you shouldn't feel like if you bring the right team to the table and you can argue that, you're fine. If everybody is a materials guy, that won't work. But if you can show that you're being disciplinary, even if you both happen to be in a physics department or an engineering department or or you're both biologists, that's okay, provided that there's really clear differentiation in what you do when it's described.
Perfect. And speaking, I want to talk about my microphone assistant.
So I think one of the comments, and I can't remember if this was the program manager or not, but they said, it's multidisciplinary. It's not typical for a single university to have all the people of expertise required for a MURI, although I guess with ASU that might be questionable because we're a huge school, but I think that's why they typically tend to be multi-university, because you just have to get different expertise that may not be co-located.
Or facilities.
Or facilities, right. Like we don't, one of our collaborators had a huge tank for octopuses, and we have a smaller tank, but not as many octopuses. But I think one thing that we did at the beginning was look at the call in the solicitation very carefully and see, read it and see, okay, try to read between the lines. What kind of expertise are they looking for? And actually, they listed it for our topic, like we're interested in this and this and this and this. And it's like, okay, well, we need somebody who knows this. We need somebody who knows that, to match it as much as possible to what they were asking for. And that required people from different disciplines anyway. So, yeah.
I also wanted to point out, just as last year we came up with a topic. We thought we understood what they wanted. We talked to them, and we were way wrong. Now, we weren't so wrong that we had to drop it, but we did drop a part of what we were planning on doing and refocus that after speaking to them. So you do want to iterate, not just talk to them once.
It's a good suggestion too. Okay, so I want to give people the opportunity to chat after, but we are going to have to close up the Zoom because we're using it again at noon. So I'm going to turn off the Zoom, and the recording is going to be distributed to interested parties. I will send out the shell document, for both the white paper and the full, and then also the checklist, and along with the other DoD programs that are good to consider to build your portfolio with DoD, if you lack that already. Again, I want to finish with the idea that if you don't see a topic this year, you might see a topic next year, and you can be working on that now. If you do see a topic and you have had that conversation, just let us know when you're putting in your white paper and when you get submitted to full, and we will be all over you. Okay. I'm sure that Dr. Bienenstock and Dr. Berman will hang out for a little bit if you want to ask them particular questions, but I want to say thank you very much for coming and giving of your talents and your experience. So thank you very much. Please get food on your way out, and thank you again for attending. You good?